and welcome back to Breakaway. I am so glad that you are with me once again. I am looking forward to just sharing with you some of the most recent insights that I have had as I continue with my journey to Breakaway. If you've been with me from the beginning, or even if this is your first time, basically, I'm just sharing with you my journey as I seek to break away from old patterns and cycles that I have been ascribing through the majority of my life, and just really discussing the different ways that I am finding myself moving forward in this journey to really embrace who God has called me to be. Now, I would be lying if I said that this journey has been easy. And I would also be lying if I said that I have not made any mistakes along the way. The reality is that, similar to, I guess, like a sport, where in order to become really good, or even a performance, in order to become really good and flawless, it takes practice. And what I'm finding is, when I look at situations as an opportunity to behave and react the way that I know God wants me to, and I take that opportunity, really take advantage of it and walk in it, I'm finding that I can be more intentional about my efforts to break away, about my efforts to really moving forward in being who God has said that I am, who God declares that I am. And it's when I don't take the opportunity to really realize, hey, this is a chance for you to break away, and I don't take that breath. That's where I find a lot of the times that it's super easy for that old pattern to sneak right on in. That doesn't mean that my go to isn't still at this moment today in this juncture the old pattern, but it does mean that when I give myself the chance to do, like, I call it, take a breath and take a step back. That's what I call it. When I do that, it really allows me to not continue with pushing forward, reacting as I would in the past. Now, I want to share with you something that I've really been studying and looking over, and really wanting to understand how to really practice this principle, because I believe that the Apostle Paul, in his epistles, he shared so much insight about what it means to break away from your old self. Granted, we're talking about a person, the Apostle Paul, who, before his transformation, he was known as Saul, as a persecutor of Christians. And he then has this transformative experience and becomes a Christian, a devout Christian himself, who then leads others to Christ. And you can tell in so many of his letters how he intentionally partners with the Spirit of God in order to live this new life, this new opportunity that he has. So I love reading his epistles, because I think he has a lot of insight that God allowed him to share with us so that we can do the same. And so I've been looking at Colossians. Specifically, I want to read Colossians chapter 3, the first couple of verses that are on there, that are in there. And it says this: so if you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you will also be revealed with him in glory. So those are the first four verses of Colossians 3. And what really sticks out to me is where he advises that our thoughts should be, how our way of thinking should be. And if you look at verse 1 and verse 2, he tells you, seek the things that are above where Christ is. And verse 2, set your minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. And I find that to be so insightful and helpful, because the reality is that when our focus is on Christ, all else that's happening in our life, it kind of loses its impact some. And I don't mean that it's still not hurtful if you are being hurt, if you've been hurt. I don't mean that it's any less emotional, that your feelings aren't involved. But there is a difference in the way that we process things when our focus is Christ. When our focus is on God and on the things that are above, when we're looking at this life from a heavenly perspective, it tends to change how things affect us because our worldview is different. Let me see if I can explain this the way that I've come to understand it and apply it even in my own life. So, simply because something has happened within a relationship that I value and esteem here on earth, and while that may cause me sadness and that may cause me pain, when I look at that situation with a heavenly perspective and I approach that situation with my focus on Christ, it allows me to process the pain differently. First off, my experience has been that in those moments where I am sad and I am feeling hurt by things that have happened, I can turn to Christ for my comfort, and the Spirit of God gives me that comfort that I need. I can turn to God for strength, and the Spirit of God gives me that strength to keep moving forward. I can look at the situation through God's eyes and see that the same way that I'm hurting, the other person involved is hurting as well. I can look at the situation not just from a place of woe is me, but of compassion for the other person that's involved in the conflict. I'm able to look at the other person as also a child of God in need of forgiveness, just like I am. And so, what ends up happening is that I can approach the situation differently so that my reactions are differently and my reactions are more constructive. Granted, depending on that person's actions, if they are repentive and reconciliatory or not, it affects how we're able to move forward. But despite of whatever that person's reaction is, I can still come from a place of love, compassion, forgiveness, and move forward in a different pattern of behavior than when my focus is just on how we would handle it here in society, where I would want to get mines, where I would want to retaliate, where I may want to ensure the person really understands how badly they've hurt me, or any of these things. A lot of times, many of those things aren't constructive anyway. So the reality is that when I keep my perspective on the things that are above and I align my thought process with Christ, then my reactions and the way that I handle situations is different. It becomes more constructive. It becomes bigger than just me. Because the reality is, though my hurt may communicate to me that it is just about me, it's really not. And things are bigger than just the me. And I can approach it from a perspective where I can allow God to step in and really do a bigger work in my life and hopefully in that person's life. That God can use me as an influence in that person's life, or even as a testament for others that might be looking at me of how God is able to step in and help. So you see, for me, what I have been finding in this journey of breakaway is that when I give myself the time to take a breath and step back, that's what I like to call it, take a breath and step back, I'm able to be more intentional about my reactions to things. And instead of allowing situations to immediately be processed through my old filter, when I am intentional about what I have decided to do, which is to break away from those old patterns, I can stop that old pattern filter and I can move it to a right mindset under God's direction. See, I can't tell you, I won't tell you that I am perfect and that every time something happens, I immediately react from a place of things above. Oh, I can't wait to get there. I'm not there yet. But I can tell you that the times where I have been successful, I have given myself the opportunity to take that breath, take that step back, and change my perspective, reframe it. And instead of looking at it from my old patterns, really looking at it from a place where my thoughts are higher, where my thoughts are lined up with God. And the times that I haven't done that and I've responded from that old filter, it's happened. It just happened this week. I can tell you that while that has unfortunately not been as constructive or constructive at all, I have then taken the opportunity to still break away from usual patterns. Okay, so let me explain that. If you know me, you know that when I feel hurt, my old pattern response is I'm either going to go off of you or I'm going to be passive aggressive. There's like no in between. It's either in your face or here's the coldest shoulder you have ever felt in your life. And so instead of reacting by allowing my hurt to then put me in a place where I completely withdraw and become passive aggressive, I recognized one, that I reacted from a place of hurt. Two, I immediately sought to make the situation right by first discussing what happened, talking about the hurt feelings, giving an opportunity for the person to express their hurt feelings, because I'm was sure there were some, especially by my reaction. And then next, taking the opportunity to apologize, because I recognized that I could have handled my reaction differently and not turned the situation into something that wasn't constructive. In the past, I probably would have just let that simmer and sit and been like, whatever, they hurt me first. I don't care. And just continued to go with it and just let the person stew, let me stew, and then eventually maybe come back in a few days, in a week, in a month, talk it over, and then move forward. So, in this endeavor to break away from old patterns, you can see that there are still times when old us will rise up, but it is our responsibility to recognize when that happens and to be responsible for acknowledging, and if there's anything that's caused anybody else any hurt or pain, being able to apologize for that, and really taking ownership of that which is in our sphere of ownership in order to really move forward correctly. The reality is, however, in looking at even this week, had my thoughts remained on things that were above, I could have handled the situation differently from the beginning. So the challenge is, as we move forward, is remembering that in this walk of being who God has called us to be, I need to ensure that I align my thoughts with Christ and I keep them aligned with Christ. I don't take a break from that alignment, but I keep my thoughts aligned with Christ, because if I have recognized that my old self is dead, I made a choice to break away from my old self in order to really live out my new self. My life has to be hidden with Christ. I have to bury myself so deep in Christ that others see Him operating through me. And that's the challenge. I hope you guys have a great one. I will see you next time.